Great, thank you, Kim. Greetings, everyone, and welcome to the Kent Branch April 2021 educational presentation. Thank you for joining us this evening. My name is Cindy Robichaux, and I am part of the Kent Branch operating team and your host for this evening. Before we begin tonight's presentation, we would like to acknowledge that we are on the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe Nation. As family historians, we have all answered the call to discover those who came before us, to share their names, to tell their stories, and to remember them. Our ancestors live on because we live on, and we have made it our mission to ensure that no one is forgotten. No matter how difficult the history is, it needs to be shared so that we can learn and do better and be supporters of our local Indigenous community. We have a couple housekeeping items before we begin. Our presentations are recorded and available on our branch YouTube channel. Your microphones and cameras have been turned off, but we welcome your questions. If you hover your mouse near the bottom of your screen, you will see the bar with the chat icon. If you click on it, the chat box will open. If you click on the little arrow beside the word that says everyone and choose the word questions, Judy Bouchard is with us here tonight assisting with those questions, and she'll answer. She'll ask the questions at the end of the presentation. Here you can type the message and the questions for us or the speaker. So let's get started with tonight's presentation. For any of you who are the first time joining us, let me tell you a little bit about Ontario Ancestors. Ontario Ancestors has been preserving and promoting family history for over 50 years. There are 30 branches all across Ontario, and Ontario Ancestors is the largest genealogical society in Canada. And there's much, much more, so be sure to check out their website. And we are the Kent branch of the Ontario Ancestors. We focus on Kent County research and general family history. We offer mentoring and education and assistance. We hold monthly DNA study groups. We hold monthly presentations such as this, and we have a fantastic resource library. Our family history library is located on the second floor of the Chatham-Kent Public Library. It is packed with historical and genealogical resources for Chatham-Kent. We are currently still closed, but hopefully we will be opening soon. We do like hearing from you, so you can contact us at the email on your screen. You can join our Kent Branch Facebook group, which has over 600 people who are interested in genealogy and Chatham-Kent history. We also have a very comprehensive website with lots of resources for both branch members and the public. So this is our website homepage. This section is available to anyone. You can see we have a master name index that you can search. We have a featured resource section that we change out regularly. We post news, upcoming events, and new items of interest. If you have not visited our website, we encourage you to come and have a look around. So to go a little deeper, this is the master index that you can search. There are almost 150,000 entries, and it is being added to constantly. In this example, I typed in the family name Tiffin, and you can see that there are several results pointing to the resource that the name is recorded in. If you want more information or to see the resource, just send us an email. Another important feature of our website is our members only section. Members of our branch have access to all kinds of resources here. It is our virtual library. If you are curious as to what we have in our members only section, you might want to watch our March 2021 presentation on our YouTube channel, where Colleen LeBay, our tech chair, took us for a tour around our website and into the members only section. This is a great way to have a little sneak peek inside. So we do not hold monthly presentations in the summer, but we do have our fall lineup ready. In September, Deanna Bullard, who many of you may know from the Chatham-Kent Museum, and the current curator of the Petroleum Museum, will discuss the early oil industry in Kent County. And then in October, Rachel Sear will tell us about her Kent County ancestor, Captain Keating. And then in November, Brian Anderson joins us to share a few skeletons in his Kent County heritage, along with a couple nice surprises. You can find more information and the links to register for these presentations on our website and in our branch Facebook group. And we hope you will join us. So let's get started with tonight's presentation by Julie Magerka. Julie has been researching and gathering information about the history of the town of Merlin in Chatham, Kent, formerly Kent County, for several years. Julie is an active member of the Merlin and Area Friendship Club and spearheaded the recent publishing of the book, Memories of Merlin, Stories of the Village. And we have a copy for our library where we can get in there and put it on the shelves. So Julie, thank you for joining us tonight to share some of these stories with us. So I'll stop sharing my screen so that you can go ahead.
Thank you, Cindy. Nice to be here. I'm going to turn on my screen share. I'm hoping everybody can see that.
That's great.
Okay. Hello, everybody. Welcome. And this is my little intro. Some of you may know me from Merlin. I grew up in Merlin and moved away and have come back in the last 9 or 10 years and got involved with the Merlin Friendship Club at that time, and who puts out a newsletter because Merlin has no newspaper and hasn't since 1971. The Seniors Club took it upon themselves to create a monthly newsletter with all kinds of information. It's not just for seniors. It does have a focus for seniors, but they have all kinds of really interesting information, a lot of photographs. And I got involved with that and also with technology, helping them with their computers and that kind of stuff. And before I knew it, my interest in genealogy and local history sort of came together, and I was asked to put them together and start writing some articles, which I did in 2017. They're published monthly, and they became the book that Cindy just showed you a little while ago. That's how I got involved with it. I never, ever would have thought I'd put a book out about Merlin. I didn't know a lot about Merlin. I lived there. I was a kid. What did I know about the history of Merlin as a kid? I just knew about the fields and the streets and the buildings and the places to play and the schools. I didn't know about who was related to whom and where they came from, not even my own family. So that was something that came into my life much later. And it led me to this obsession that I now have with both history in general and specifically Merlin and Kent County history. And I love the resources that are available to all of us, either virtually or in person, nudge, nudge, wink, wink, let's get in there anytime. I miss it so much. I can't believe it's been so long since I have been able to go in and use the resources. So on to the village of Merlin. By the way, it is pronounced Merlin, not Merlin. So if you want to act like a native, it's Merlin. How it got that name, nobody's sure. There's various stories. It could be a tiny hamlet in Scotland. It could be after a hawk called the Merlin hawk that is native to the area. Nobody's really sure. I did find on an early map with the lots and landowners marked on it that there was a landowner called A, the initial A, Merlin. It's the only time I've seen it, but I have not been able to prove anything about that. So when Cindy asked me back in March if someone could do this, I said, sure, I'd be willing to do it. And I'm going to enjoy this very much. I am already. But I thought we'd be live by now. I said to her at the time, oh, by June, we'll all be together. It didn't work out that way. So that's too bad. Anyway, I guess I'm going to stay on the screen there because I don't know how to get rid of my image. So I'll just go here and we're going to move on now with my slides. I'm not a big proponent of having a lot of text. I just do images and I talk. Oh, I disappeared. That's good. My slides aren't moving. Oh, there we go. All right. For those of you that don't know, it's a very small village. It's circled there in the slide, and it's divided between two townships, Raleigh on the east side and East Tilbury on the west side. It's about 15 minutes to Tilbury going west. It's about 20 minutes to Chatham if you go over to Charing Cross and up, go east to Charing Cross. Fletcher is to the north. I don't know if you can see my mouse. I can't get my laser pointer, so I really can't point at anything. I don't know where my pointer is. Anyway, the circle will focus you in on Merlin. What you see there is the middle road runs between Merlin and Tilbury and Merlin and Charing Cross to the east. It is the town line that runs down to the lake from Merlin going south and going north to Fletcher. That's called the Merlin town line. They all have county road numbers and things now, but nobody uses them, and I don't even know them. The lake is only about 2 miles, 2.5 miles to the south of Merlin, but Merlin is landlocked. Merlin has no rivers, no creeks, just a reservoir that was put in for the railroad. This is a photo that I found in the Chatham Daily News, and it's north to the top. And without my laser pointer, I can't see where I can get that. So anyway.
Julie, it's Cindy. I think we can see your, we can see your mouse.
Oh, I didn't know.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much, Cindy. Yep. Okay, town line right here, north-south. Middle road is here, running along here, and then it jogs a bit going that way to Tilbury. This is north. This is the railway to the south, and then going south on the town line would be going to the lake. This is the Four Corners. This area here is the Four Corners, which is the heart and soul of Merlin, always has been, and probably always will be as long as there's a place called Merlin. This is a little closer view of the Four Corners. This was taken, we know, after 1968. I took this photo from John Rhodes's Chatham History Facebook page when he did a little story on Merlin, early Merlin. And I really like this shot because here is there were 3 generations, 3 different blacksmiths that were in this location. That is my dad's blacksmith shop right there. This is Erie Street or King Street north. This is the Four Corners, again, north, going west to Tilbury, and so on. But we know the date of this because the great big marquee hotel, which you will see later, was removed in 64, 68 or 64, and the huge Marshall block, which was here on the corner, built by George C. Marshall, you'll see that later, was taken down in 1964. So Merlin has lost a lot of its old buildings, much to its detriment, like anywhere else where you tear down history and, pave paradise and put up a parking lot. It's just the way it goes sometimes. It's sad, but it's certainly not unique to Merlin. So that gives you an idea there of sort of the hub of activity, all the different, right around the Four Corners. There's lots of businesses going south, a lot more going west, a few more going east, and the church and things like that. But it gives you an idea. But even before any of this, Merlin was just woods, just like most of Kent County. It was just dense, heavy woods. Some of those trees, according to Squire Foxton, he was one of the very early settlers, excuse me, he bought his farm just on the east side of Merlin from William White, who was another one of the earliest white settlers to come into the area, because of course it was only Native Canadians who were living in this area and all of the woodland critters. So by time the white settlers from England and Scotland and Ireland were coming in, they were getting their land, and it was rough. It was rough bush. It was dense, rough bush with very few trails. And I find this myself so hard to picture. I can look at images, I can look at, there aren't many photographs, of course, but, any images, drawings, it's just so hard to imagine when it was nothing but woods and the natives living within their communities in the woods and all of the bears and foxes and raccoons. And that was it, that was it. That's what they came to. And I just find that astonishing and inspiring, really inspiring. Things started to change in the 1820s. This is when settlers, they were moving a little bit farther more inland away from the lakes and rivers. A lot of settlement had started already along the shores of Lake Erie, along the shores of the Thames River, but more inland away from the waterways. The land was not even surveyed. It's just being surveyed by Colonel Talbot and his crew of merry surveyors. And into this came William Piper Smith with a brother. I don't know if it was his brother or a son, but two Smiths came from Montreal, where they had maybe settled in 1806. There is some indication that they did arrive in 1806. Yeah, in Canada, made their way to Montreal, and eventually these two Smith men took an ox cart with two oxen and made the trip. I mean, think about it, Montreal to Kent County by ox cart, the two of them. Pretty amazing. So they made that trip. They found this area where they could, claim some land, and they built themselves a little cabin there in the woods. Then they made another trip back to Montreal to collect the family. And this family, William Smith's family, was his wife and 11 or 12 children who came back. And that date is supposed to be around, we think, around 1825. A lot of this stuff, excuse me, a lot of this stuff is really difficult to verify. And I don't know about you, but whenever you're searching for a name like Smith or Brown or something along those lines, it gets very confusing. So there's more work to be done on that for sure. But there are records from descendants of William Piper Smith and others that does help. So anyway, they're living in their little cabin, and along come the government surveyors who are going to map out some new roads, which is going to happen to intersect. These roads are going to intersect right in front of the business, the little home and the little businesses he's getting set up, like his little blacksmith shop and his little saw shop where he, because they're cutting down the trees. So the surveyors come along and say, oh, let's put a road here and let's put a road here. And he's got a crossroads, an intersection. And it occurred to him that this would bring people to the area. So he built a saloon called the Smith's Corner Saloon. He built it on the southwest corner of the intersection. And as I said, they still needed their industry. Oops, sorry, I just sort of moved that. They still needed their industry. So he was blacksmithing, they were milling lumber, and they also set up a black salt production from burned timber to make potash, which was then, I guess, shipped to Blenheim, where it was turned into soap. So they had some business going on to support, because the tavern wouldn't be that busy back in the early days. I think it got fairly busy later. So in 1812, or up until 1812, there was really only an Indian trail going east-west, which is the middle road, that road running east-west from Charing Cross to Tilbury. That was only an Indian trail. And it was soldiers from Colonel Talbot's army or military group that started building a military road over that old trail. And the reason for that was they wanted to provide an alternative, alternate route going east-west to Highway 3 or Talbot Trail running along the north shore of Lake Erie, because a lot of the military troops were being fired upon by ships in the lake. And they wanted to move farther north. So there was an Indian trail, and they decided that was far enough, 2.5 miles away, that new road would be a whole lot safer. And apparently, according to the Historical Atlas of Essex and Kent counties, the town line and the middle road were fully established by 1828. We don't have pictures, of course. Well, maybe someone does, but I certainly have never come across pictures of William Piper Smith, the original Smith to the area, but this is his grandson. This is Abe Smith at age 80, wearing his grandfather's top hat. In the Windsor Daily Star in 1938, there was a large article that I was fortunate enough to find about Abe and his ancestors. And this guy was quite a character. He had lost his right hand and later the thumb of his left hand, but he loved using his granddad's musket and his granddad's sword. He doesn't know where the sword came from. He's not sure of its provenance, but he lived very simply with his second wife. His first wife had died. He lived very simply with his second wife just outside of town, because the Smiths eventually did relocate to the west of Merlin, to the tiny hamlet of Stewart. Stewart is closer to Merlin. It's about 2.5 miles from Merlin to the west. And this is Abe, and he didn't like any of the newfangled things, he said in 1938. He even went to town. When he had to go into town, into Merlin, he did it with a team of mules. In the same article, a picture of his grandfather's simple abode in Stewart. And notice that it's frame now and not log. And that's where the family retired to after they left Merlin. They weren't in Merlin that long, maybe 15, 20 years. And then they moved and set up Stewart. I keep saying Valletta, it's Stewart. And Stewart now is really, I think there's 1 or 2 houses and a cemetery in Stewart. But Stewart at one time had a number. It had a school, it had a couple of businesses, and a blacksmith shop, things like that. It was a small hamlet, but a busy little place. Around the same time that the roads were being put in, the Irish Catholic settlers were arriving as well, and they set up St. Patrick's Church on the 10th concession. This is going north of Merlin. And because a lot of the land was already on the Talbot Road and the Middle Road were already occupied or becoming occupied, the settlers took up lots north of Smith's Corners, and sort of from concession 11, just north of the village of Merlin, to concession 5, which is farther up north towards the river, the Thames River. And they settled in both Raleigh and Tilbury East. And some of the names here, the very earliest Catholics here were Dillon, Squire Dillon, who spawned a very large family with lots and lots of descendants. The Drews, ditto, Gohuli, McEwen, Hickey, Keene, Wellwood, and Finland. It certainly isn't all of them, but it's some of the very earliest ones. It was Squire Dillon and Peter McEwen, who each donated 2.5 acres of their land for the church so they could build their church in 1855. Previously, masses had just been held at the homes of Martin Drew, and Martin Drew's farm was just a little bit east of where the church was finally built. When I was putting this together, I just thought concession 10, which is where the church is only about a mile to Smith's Corners. So that's not a long horse trip ride to get to the tavern at the corner. So just a thought. By the 1840s, there was much more immigration to the area. And one of the earliest of this time period was George Sales and his wife, Harriet Butler, who came from Yorkshire in England. Because Mr. Smith had moved west, George and his wife, or George, I mean, the wife was busy raising children, but George took over the saloon, Mr. Smith's saloon, and the blacksmith shop. These Sales had a very large family as well, and there are descendants today still in the village and spread out throughout Canada and the US, of course. A large branch of the Sales went to both Montana and Alberta, and there's a lot of them out there to this day. This is the oldest blacksmith in Canada at the time, and this was the son of George Sales. This is Zachariah Sales, who was born about 1853. And at the age of 90, he retired. He started smithing, sorry, I should say he started smithing at the age of 17. He did his training in Charing Cross and in Michigan actually as well. He went to a few places there to learn his trade. He was supposed to be a carpenter, but he had a foot injury when he was very young, which precluded him from, climbing and, going up on roofs and things like that and ladders. So he decided to be a blacksmith, and at 17, he set up his business and got started, and he retired at the age of 90. Really, 90. He was still wielding that heavy, heavy hammer and standing over a hot forge every day and busy as anything. He died at the age of 95 in 1948. But when he was in his 80s, I think, when there was an article done in the Windsor paper about him, and he was said to be, and I think it was 1938, the oldest smith, certainly in Canada, and they thought likely, or in Ontario, and likely in Canada. In the interview that the paper had, and they talked to him about what Merlin was like in the early days, he just recalled how there were just so very few white people, white settlers, that it was mostly natives in the area when he was a young boy. Remember, he was born about 1852, 53. And there was mostly natives in the area when he was a boy and a teenager. It turns out his best friend, his buddy, his good friend, Walter Hall, who you'll know a little bit more about later, was another smith in town. He came on, they were born about the same year, and they became best friends, and both worked in Merlin because there was a great demand for their services, not just shoeing horses, but buggies, wagons, making implements, tools, all the things they typically did. Zach's personal best, as he claimed, was 22 horses shoed in 10 hours with one assistant. That's got to be a sore back. Another family that came a little bit later, this is the George C. Marshall family. They came around, they first settled when they came from Scotland into Halton County, around the Oakville area. They came to Merlin about 1855 to be farmers. George was married. This George Sales that you see here, his picture from a directory, he married a daughter of George Sales. We were speaking of George Sales and his wife, and then his son, Zach. Well, he married a daughter of George Sales. So two of the earliest families are already linked together, which of course happened a lot in these small communities. Two of George's sons, George and his brother, they were the son of James. I kind of skipped over that part. Sorry about that. It was the James Marshall family that came and settled. And two of his sons, George and John, took over the mill, the sawmill, the saw shop, and enlarged on that. That was located sort of on the northeast side of the Four Corners. They enlarged it in 1877. They created a much larger sawmill, and George and his brother John became very well known in the area as millers and merchants, mill owner and merchant. They built a store. Their merchant status came from the store they built right on the northeast corner, a very large brick building called the Marshall Block, of course, which really was their store. For the most part, was made up of their store with some meeting rooms upstairs and a couple of other places. But their store came to be called the Hub, and that's how it was advertised in early newspapers. Around this time, around the 1880s, 1890s, the population of Merlin was about 100 people and growing. This is the Marshall Block. It's called the Hub. The store is here. You'll see the store here, meeting rooms upstairs, a couple of other businesses here. And this is a newer view. This is probably around the 19-teens, and this is around the 1940s, just to show you the sort of the size, of the building. That building behind it, here and here, was the Marquis Hotel. both these buildings, both of them came down in the 60s, which left, of course, a huge, gaping, wide open area. That area now is mostly home to the Kinsman Park. And on this little corner, there's a little fast food takeout place called the Flame and Frostbite, which has got new ownership and it's very good. I was told last time I was just there. So this is inside the hub, but this is after George Marshall had died. And it's a store run by John Wittes and his brother, Edward Neal. And this photo is from about 1900. Just gives you an idea of the inside of a store at the time, which I think is, pretty interesting to see too. Other families who were, settling into the area in the 1840s, 1850s, were the Hall families, Powell, Lum, Foxtons. There were others. Certainly I'm not being comprehensive here, but I'm just picking out some of the ones that were very early. Samuel Hall was the father of Walter Hall, the blacksmith I mentioned, and John Powell, and that's actually his photo from Ancestry. John Powell, pictured here, he was born in 1790 in England and died 1877 in Tilbury East. He had a farm with a lot of acreage just to the west of the corner of Merlin. There was his property later that became a whole other, as it was subdivided and subdivided, that became things like the property for the high school, the property for the Anglican Church, and so on Middle Road West, which is also called William Street. Just to give you an idea again of the buildings, the street, the mud street, the dirt street. This is Walter Hall's blacksmith shop. Not on the corner, but to the south, it's on the south, the northwest side. I get my directions mixed up even when I'm driving. The northwest, just down from the corner, west of the corner, you can see here the hotel. This is the new hotel, which dates the photo probably to about 1901, 1902. This building is the only one that didn't burn in 1908 when there was a fire that took out a whole lot of other buildings in the area. Later on, this building was sold a couple of times and finally ended up being James Newman's Chevrolet Oldsmobile dealer and gas station, Sunoco gas station in Merlin. Old Sam Hall, the father, his story is interesting. Just worth mentioning. He settled around 1846. He was a farmer, but sometimes he was a medical man, and he helped to set broken bones and treat wounds, and help people with their ailments, much as the women did with childbirth and labor. Sam was married to a daughter of John Powell, the one you saw previously, the early settler John Powell. And she is written about in Victor Lauriston's book, Romantic Kent, because as a small child, she was down by the lake shore with her dad in the woods, and they were bagging pigeons and whatever they could find. And her dad sent her back, said, you take the pigeons and the gun and you go, I've got business to do. And she headed out back. She got lost. And for about 5 days, I think 4 or 5 days, she was lost in the woods, but was found. The good news is she was found. And after much searching and many people, looking for her. Walter Hall's sister, just to mention, his sister Melissa was married to another carriage maker in the village, who was William Theobald, another English settler who was previously a carriage maker in Chatham. And then he came to Merlin when he married Walter's sister, and he set up his shop on Erie Street as well. So in 1848, Merlin was getting its mail. It was Royal Mail, and they were getting it by coach twice a week and then 3 times a week, things like that. But in 1868, and that's an authentic 1868 stamp that I found, thank God for the internet, the first post office was set up. I've seen records that say not until 1876 was it set up, but the post office, the official post office website says 1868, with the first postmaster was a man named E.S. Benedict. This is the time, they say, 1868, when the name was changed. Merlin became the name to distinguish it from the other Smith's Corners, which wasn't a corner really in Stuart, but I guess to distinguish between the Smiths in Stuart and the former Smith settlement in Merlin, they changed the name to Merlin. 1870, a church was built at the east end of Merlin on land donated by a bunch of different people, including Squire Foxton, George Powell, who is the son of John, a few of the King brothers, James, William, John, and Samuel King. That was in 1870. They raised a whopping $500, and the land was donated by Squire Foxton. I might have already said that. The sketch here is done by Tina Mifflin, who did a lot of really great sketches for a lot of Merlin newsletters, and unfortunately has passed away. But she was, a very accomplished sketch artist and artist, and it's great to have someone be able to use some of her stuff. 1879, a little school was built just here on the other side of the church, and with a little cemetery between the church and the school. And this building, this church, was in use until 1898, when they built a much bigger, grander brick building. This is 1877. I'm sort of trying to go a bit chronologically here. And this is not a picture of the sawmill, but it's just a Canadian picture of debarking a great big tree. And their mill was underway and became a very, very busy place with all those trees, and a source of employment for many, many people. Moving along, in 1882, John Balla, who had come from elsewhere in Ontario, built this house. This picture is from 1975, and the house is now gone. But I got this photo from Sue Marshall, who is a descendant of the Marshall family. And this was a house that they built as a hotel, Good Temperance Hotel, eventually, because there were a lot of people traveling through Merlin now that the roads were getting better, and there was oil and gas that was being developed in Tilbury East. And in its day, it had a huge balcony up on the second floor with meeting rooms upstairs and other rooms to stay in. It had a livery stable, a feed stable, and its very own clean water well for travelers, and their horses. So it was a popular spot as well. John Balla built it, but John Pete took it over eventually. Two different years I mention here, 84 and 98. First is Dr. Charles Bell came to Merlin, and 98, Dr. Oliver came to Merlin. For a while, they were there together. Spent years, both of them, in town with the two doctors. Dr. Bell was quite political, and he hosted a lawn, and he's got a very, very spacious sort of corner lot on the northeast corner. And he hosted a very large political gathering of liberals in 1911, which William Lyon Mackenzie King gave a rousing speech. I put quotation marks around that. He was the Minister of Labor at the time in Laurier's government, later to become Prime Minister. So Merlin had, a lot of interesting political things going on, and travelers passing through, and business and development. So Dr. Bell built this building that stands today. This is a building on Erie Street South, or King Street, and it's facing west on Erie, and it was built by Dr. Bell in 1898. This photo shows it from in the 1940s. When it became, when Max Marshall, Sue Marshall's father, took over, it became a very popular hangout for everybody, for coffee, soda fountain. The soda fountain was to be, the best sodas and drinks you could get anywhere, and for high school students, of course, as well. Just to the left, you can barely see there at the left of the building, is Dr. Bell's house on the corner. You'll see another shot of it a little bit later, much larger, but it's there. To the left of this building, or to the north, it's just an empty lot at this time. It's just a large empty lot. And of course, that area was used a lot for bandstands, bandstand performances, and musical performances and things like that. The 1890s is when Merlin really started to take off, which, at first I thought, well, that seems kind of late, but it's really not. It's really in keeping with the development in Kent County. Chatham really got going in the 1880s. So Merlin in the 1890s was, really bustling and starting to take off. So it was turning into something that looked like this. This is the earliest photo I've ever seen. Comes from Sue Marshall. Once again, thank you, Sue. Sue is from Merlin, but lives in Chatham, if I haven't mentioned that. It's labeled Merlin down here. You can just make out the handwriting. I'm sure, I don't know if it was at the time, but it's the four corners. Now, the date's likely the 1890s. Which direction it's looking is a guess on my part, but I'm guessing that this is southwest. This is the southwest corner, the northwest corner. Over here would be the Marshall block. And it makes sense that maybe, someone was in the Marshall block, maybe on the second floor, and took this photo looking southwest. Don't know. Just, we're not sure. And unfortunately, there's not many around that I can ask, but I love the photo. I just think it's great. Some kind of wonderful activity going on and people in the street and buggies, and it's just a great shot. In 1892, it was a pretty big deal when Hiram Walker brought his Lake Erie and Detroit River Railroad to Merlin. The station opening in late 1892 for both freight and passenger service. It later became the Père Marquette around in the 1920s, I believe. And then later it was Chesapeake and Ohio. It was a really big deal. It added to the boom in Merlin, but the best part was all of the local farmers and producers and businessmen did not have to take their buggies or get people to drive wagons to Fletcher to put on the train there, the Southern, I think it was Canadian Southern Railway in Fletcher, because that trip in the wintertime and in the summertime or during rainy season by wagon was really a miserable trip. So now they could just do it here. And it was a busy, very, very, very busy place. Unfortunately, like a lot of smaller communities, the rails were ripped out. In Merlin, they were ripped out in 1982. The station closed. The last station manager was Reg Reynolds, and he retired, and the rails were taken out, and now it's just a little hump in the road. 1895, a series of ads about some of the Merlin businesses. Not all of them, but some of them. John Dent had a bakery, not just a garage. William Trott, shoes. Rumble Tinsmith, Sales and Halliday, big store. There's the Chatham Planet doing their own. Mr. Mason, the Flour Mill, Mr. Zeller, Dr. Oliver. Lots of these people, but they ran a special feature in 1895 on Merlin, and they did an interview with George Sales, who at the time was 75, and talked about the history of Merlin and the merchants, each of the merchants. It was an advertising feature, but it was still very interesting. They mention each of the merchants by name. By this time, the population has been growing. It's up to about 200 people now. So they've got a pretty good business section or business division going. 1895 is also the first telephone service came to Merlin. There were about 40 subscribers, both business and personal. And that is an actual 1895 crank telephone, again, thanks to the internet and Google Images. Dr. Oliver was the manager at the time, and he got the phone number 1. And that number stayed in Merlin until we went dial in 1962. And the last place to have number 1 was a garage that went through a series of different owners and ended as the Brook Shell Station. And they had number 1 right until 1962. This paper, the Merlin Mirror, started in 1898 by Arthur Nicholson, who came from Ridgetown. He was an Englishman who immigrated in the 1890s, and he worked at the Ridgetown paper and married there. I have 4 pages, four digital pages of this, thanks to a friend who found it in a house in Merlin, because there are no copies. I have looked, I have searched, I have asked on websites, Facebook groups, if anybody's got them. It existed from 1898 into 1908, and it's the most mythical unicorn newspaper that I can think of to get copies of. But at least we have 4 pages out of the 8. It was an 8-page paper at the time. And as I said, Arthur Nicholson started it. He sold it in 1902 to Percy Stone. Percy Stone ran it. But he got involved, he perjured himself in some kind of a local option vote in 1907. The details of which are beyond me right now, I forget. But he was about to be arraigned or charged. So he hopped on a train and headed west and got out of town and left the paper behind. So it was taken over then. His successor was a man named C.A. Barnes after Percy. There's when Percy still had it and had to leave. Mr. Barnes had the paper. Unfortunately, I'm going to skip to a slide here. This is a picture of the northwest corner, and this burning building is the newspaper office of the Merlin Mirror in 1908, when a fire started in that building with chemicals like a gasoline benzene or something like that they were using to clean the typesetting machines, the typesetting letters. So back to this. Percy Stone left and C.A. Barnes took over, and it was C.A. Barnes who started the fire. Later on, the paper became, after 1908, the paper was bought out by Walter Marshall, son of George Marshall, and his son later, Wilbur Marshall, took over. So it was 3 generations, 2 generations of Marshalls, but 3 generations of Marshalls in town doing business. In 1901, I mentioned this before, the Marquis Hotel. I love the Marquis Hotel. I lived beside it, just a bit of an empty lot to the left, to the west, to the north, just here. And we played around this when I was a kid, and it was spooky and it was fun, and it was sometimes abandoned, sometimes operating, but it was, for its day, quite amazing. It was built in 1901 by John Peet, who had been running John Balla's commercial house, the house I showed you earlier. For about 7 years, 1942 to 1949, it served as the high school after the continuation school burned in August of 1942. It was also apartments at different times. There were restaurants set up there in this front area, barbershop. People lived upstairs in the rooms, but just over time, it just wasn't taken care of. It was probably, I should have mentioned, maybe it was about a 65-room hotel when it started, and over the years as it sold and resold, the number of rooms changed and the number of amenities was adjusted and of course got more modern. It was torn down in 1968 after several different attempts to keep it going. It was sad to see it go, very sad. Just quickly, I want to show you the southwest corner. I'm trying to show you different corners here. Dr. Bell's house, I told you Dr. Bell built the Bell Block. And it's Dr. Bell's. This is Middle Road, because Middle Road goes around. It kind of takes a jog to the left going east. So Dr. Bell's house and Walter Hall's house. Walter Hall, the blacksmith, just across the street. He would walk down this wooden sidewalk to get to his shop, his carriage and blacksmith shop across the street. Again, showing you this. This is where the buildings that burned, except for this one, where my mouse is. That was Walter Hall's. It did not burn, but these buildings did burn. And this is what came up after. Within a few months, the International Order of Foresters rebuilt their building, this one at the corner, rebuilt it in brick, 2-story with meeting rooms, a few different shops, spaces on the floor. This is Erie Street here on the right, and this is Middle Road, or Aberdeen William Street on the left. And this is on the cover of the book, because it's just so hard to believe. It looks like a metropolis in this picture with these buildings. This is the Sales and Holiday Store block on the southwest corner. Remember, the southwest corner is where William Piper Smith started his saloon. So the saloon is now gone, And in its place in 1898, Enoch Sales, son of George and Harriet, and William Halliday, one of the Hallidays, got together. They've been operating on the opposite, the kitty corner out of the Marshall Block, but they got together and built this building, and it housed several different businesses. There was a drugstore, their department store was here, the hardware store was here. There's a blank space that was filled in later with more stores. It must have been just a beautiful, beautiful area to see. Unfortunately, it burned down in 1916 and was not really replaced. Just an indoor shot, the Sales and Halliday store. They had the post office here. They were the Hallidays, both J.A., John, and his brother James were postmasters, and John's wife, Minnie, were postmasters for many, many years. And all of this was gone in a huge fire that took it out. The northeast corner, again, Marshall Block. You're seeing again, looking east, the church, the United Church. This is going towards South Buxton, North Buxton, Charing Cross. And this way, a couple of guys sitting here. Wouldn't it be great to know who they are in these old photos, but you don't get to find out. The southeast corner is, I showed you just before, Dr. Bell's house on the corner. That changed. The house is still there, but that blank yard I mentioned to you, that sort of large corner lot that Dr. Bell held, they used for band performances and political rallies, got sold eventually, and they built the Bank of Montreal on that corner. Dr. Bell's house is just here behind the tree, and his Bell block with the drugstore and the library and different things that were here right beside it. These three buildings are all existing today in Merlin. However, the bank closed just a couple of years ago. Oops. So a little piece I found in the paper, which I thought was really cute, from 1894, and the village is growing. Strangers with capital are coming in, and the villagers are beautifying the town with shade trees. It was growing. It did continue to grow for quite a while, until finally it was described in a number of different features in different years, 1958, 1928, 1950, other years as thriving, wealthy, and prosperous. And I love this postcard. It's something I just came across quite recently from a friend, her mother-in-law's collection. And it shows, a lot of the Bell block is here. This was the Sales building. It was the Wittes building for a while, and then the Sales building. Back here, the train is actually passing through. This is probably late 40s, early 50s, but a lot of business, cars. The population was around 500 or more by this time. Merlin was growing. And then, of course, by the late 60s, early 70s, people were going to Chatham, to Windsor, to different places. And of course, the decline happened as it did in other smaller towns. Look around in small towns now, and they're much diminished from what they were before. But Merlin has got great spirit and a lot of great people who are very committed to keeping that town going and growing. And the newest business to have come to town is the Summers Gold Honey Company in the former Brooks Garage. And the cafe in the Marshall Block here closed, of course, during COVID, but before, when the owner died, and is being reopened. This building has been torn down because it was really falling down. And the Seniors Club is in this building here, post office here. The apartment building in the background there is still there. So there's still, a good infrastructure. And as I said, the people there have got an incredible amount of pride and spirit, and they're going to keep it going. So more power to them, and I'll do what I can. So there ends my presentation. I hope I didn't talk too fast.
That was wonderful. Thank you so very much. I'm sure there's some questions. I know I have a few comments and questions myself. Judy, are you able to turn on your mic? And did you have any questions?
I have a few.
Do you want to turn your camera back on, Julie?
I'll start at the top. Okay.
I'm trying to figure out where I'm getting that, go, let's go.
From Catherine, we have anyone descended from William Silas Larrabee, as this part of Kent County would be related to my mother's ancestors. He was a brother of my great-grandmother, Hannah Larrabee, wife of Angus Simon Cameron. W.S. Larrabee's parents were James Henry Larrabee and Angela Lizert. Many spelling variations of her name. They're buried in the Parkville Union Cemetery. Just as a comment, I guess, more.
Yeah, I guess more of a comment, because I do know the name Larrabee. It's not something I have personally researched, but it sounds like they have quite a lengthy, well-established background in that area. So it certainly would be something I would look into.
From Sue Cromwell, what concessions and lot numbers were there at the Four Corners?
The concession is 11, and the lot, I have spent a lot of time taking courses on using on land, which I don't enjoy. I enjoy the classes. I don't enjoy on land, is what I mean. The lots all start at lot 1, 100 acres, lot 1, then subdivide. So, John Powell had the northwest corner. He had 200 acres. It was all lot 1 until it was subdivided down. But if you're looking at the middle road, it's considered concession 11 in the records. And then you have to look at South Middle Road, which is that you're looking at the southwest or the southeast side of the town line. It's not an easy thing to do, and I certainly haven't mastered it, but I'm working on it.
The hall building is very large. Was it also a residence upstairs?
Which hall? Oh, the hall. No, I don't think it was. I don't think anybody lived, as far as I know, I don't think anybody lived there. I think it was storage. I think because it had a very large door at the top, and I think they uplifted and loaded things into there, like carriages and sleighs, which is what Walter built. He and his buddy, Zach Sales, were doing a lot of that.
This is from Cindy. If someone has photos or info, would you be interested in them, and how best to contact you?
Yeah, I'm always on the quest, like any genealogist or historian or anybody interested in the past. It's the holy grail to get something, even people think, oh, they wouldn't want this. You don't know how significant and what a joy it is to see old records, old treasures, pictures, newspapers, documents, anything like that. So if anybody wants to share with me, I'm on Facebook, Julie Magerka on Facebook, and or you can, I guess, email me at, it's just my initial and my last name, so it'd be J Magerka, Magerka @gmail.com. And I'd be happy to help you with any information as well, if there's anything that I know that I can share with you.
Okay, Mary Jane's asking the question, why was the Catholic Church not built in town?
Well, I think because the Irish settlers settled north of the village. It's about a mile. It's not far. It starts less than a mile north. That they started to settle on the different, the 12th, the 10th concession, and the 9th and 8th and so on going up. It was just a matter of maybe the lots weren't available, or I think it's more likely they wanted to be near, they wanted their own church in their own area where they were located, and they were like a settlement. The Catholic Irish people settled quite separately from the Protestant settlers who settled into the village.
From Penelope, she wants to thank you very much for an interesting history. It was a pleasure to attend this webinar from Kitchener, Ontario. We had ancestors near Merlin, but not in Merlin.
Well, that's really nice to hear. I'd like to know the name of the ancestors.
Well, she's still here. Maybe she'll get a sentence.
Maybe. Thank you, Penelope.
From Jim, where was Herb Dillon's insurance office?
Herb worked out of his house most of the time, which was on the very west end of Middle Road across from the high school area. Going back, I've got a map really of that area. But this is going north-south. Herb's would be off. I don't know if you can still see my screen, maybe not. But Herb worked out of his home most of the time. And I think maybe sometime he worked in Chatham. I'm not sure. But he was part of the Irish Catholic settlement. I mean, even though he lived in town and worked in town, his family was very, very prominent in the St. Patrick's Church out on the 10th concession.
So that's all the questions I have for you at this time. I also want to thank you for the presentation. I did find it very interesting as well. So.
Well, I thank you. I thank everybody who attended. It's very nice that people have expressed an interest in Merlin. It's quite an interesting little town with lots of characters.
I got one new message from Martha. Thanks, Julie and Cindy. From Martha Dent and Carol Howell, listening on my computer.
Oh, Martha and Carol. Carol's the source. Carol and Martha both, but Carol is my source for a lot of anecdotes and stories and memories of Merlin. She's one of the older citizens who's just got a memory like a steel trap. Thank you, Carol. Hi.
That's great. And I saw that there was also a Marshall attendee as well. So I'm
Barb Marshall. She's from Calgary.
Oh, wow. Another descendant, I'm sure.
Merlin girl.
Oh, great, great. And I also noticed that Les Mansell, he's also
Hi, Les.
Yeah, so he's one of a longtime member of the branch and very instrumental in getting the resources that we have now. And he pretty much knows the history of all the small little villages.
Sure does.
And when we were looking, you had come and asked us about the Merlin mirror, and I didn't really know anything about it. So Les just happened to be in the library at the time. So I asked him, and he also was saying the same things that you were saying, how difficult it is to find, and it would be in somebody's attic. And so, yeah, so hi, Les, thank you for joining us.
Hi, Les.
I have one more thing from Denise again. She says, from Martha, she says, Carol says, love you, Julie. I love all the old stories.
Love you too, Carol.
And then from Denise Powell, how can I see this presentation again?
Well, Denise, we have been recording all along. So we will do a quick edit on it in the next couple of days, and then we will upload it to our YouTube channel. And I can either send the link directly to Julie and she can forward it on to you. If you use Facebook at all, I usually put the notification on Facebook that it's ready and available with a link, which will take you straight to the video. So we'll make sure we get the information to you between Julie or myself, okay? I have an ancestor, William White, so I think I need to go do some digging to see if there's any connection. Now, mine are mostly from Essex County, but they did meander back into Wheatley and Tilbury area. And I have quite a few people in the Stewart Cemetery. So I think maybe I need to do some more digging in that area. And then personally, I want to know if there will be a second volume to this wonderful book. And is this book still available if people are interested in purchasing it?
Oh, thank you for asking that. Yes, the book is available. They can contact Ruth Haddock in Chatham. Her name is Ruth Haddock, spelled like the fish. And her email is rhaddock@gmail. No, scratch that. rhaddock@ciaccess.com. That's ciaccess.com. And her name's Ruth. I don't have her phone number handy, but you can look up Haddock and Merlin and get Harry's phone number and call Ruth. She's the one in charge. And I'm writing monthly articles still. I started in 2017, put the book out in November last year. And I've written again, like since December till now. So that's whatever, 6-7 months. So I'm not running out of topics. There's lots left to go. So I expect in maybe another, year and a half or so, there'll be a volume 2. because there's just so many stories.
Well, that's great. And if people didn't quite catch that email, you can shoot us an email and we will get your information over to Julie and she can hook you up. So there's lots of ways. Don't just communicate with us and we'll make sure we answer the questions or anything that you need. And I think that might be it for this evening. And finally, I just want to say that we definitely agree with you that we are definitely ready to get back into the library. So,
Yes.
so
Yes.
hopefully within the the next month or so, we'll be able to welcome all the visitors back again, and we'll start getting those resources off the shelf and microfilms going again. And we're looking.
Oh, wow. Oh,
everybody,
wow.
hopefully. So,
How exciting.
Judy, finally, is there any final questions?
No,
Okay, great. Okay, well, thank you so much, Julie, for joining us, and thank you,
Thank
Kim,
you.
for organizing the Zoom, and Judy for helping out. And we will see everybody back here. We're still not sure whether we'll be in person or not in person by then, so we just played it safe, and we thought for the rest of the year we would just do online. So we will see you back here September. Thank you all, and have a good night. Bye now. Thanks.
bye-bye.